How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the final episode of the Elemental Spell tier list. It's definitely been a lot of work making these, so I appreciate all of your support as we've gone through all these spells in the game. So let's finish this off with the very last one being water spells, which are basically just ice spells, but I guess same difference, you know? One is hard like me and the other is wet like your mother after she sees me, so basically the same thing. Anyways, let's get on to the rest of this video. And for the first starting spell of the water tree is going to be Frost Lance, which summons a sharply pointed icicle to the front of you, and the icicle will accelerate forward or towards the target you locked onto prior to casting the spell. This spell, in my opinion, is probably the best starter spell in the game. High damage with low spirit cost, on top of surprisingly long range and speeds up the farther it goes. Very powerful spell. In PvP, it's decently strong, and spamming it can mess up the timing of your opponents and catch them off guard, but definitely not the best water spell for PvP. So, comparing it to all the other starter spells, easy S tier, but still, we're comparing it towards every spell in the game, so it's still going to go into the respectable A tier slot. The very next spell is going to be Cloud Stance, which makes it so for a certain period of time, it reduces the consumption of spirit when deflecting. And this one is definitely more dependent on your playstyle. It saves about half the cost of your deflects, so as you see here, normally mine costs 87 spirit, and then it puts it down to 43, which is actually pretty amazing. But only amazing if you're not great at deflecting. Not saying I'm the best in the world, I miss my deflects a lot in PvP too, but it doesn't make it or break it to where it determines if I'm going to win or not because of the spell. It lasts actually very long, so for newer players, getting this and using this for, learning your deflects is actually really good. But for end game play, I'm still going to put it in the C tier category, but for anyone else that, like I said, trying to learn deflecting, this is actually really good to use. The Frost Malice spell is up next, and it generates a large icicle to the front of you and blah 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 blah. Basically, it's just a giant Frost Lance. Honestly, there's not really any point in not just using Frost Lance over the spell. It does double the damage, but at the same time has an extremely long cast time, like double, triple the cast time of the Frost Lance. It's insane. So by the time that you are using this spell, you can already cast 3, maybe 4 Frost Lances for way more damage at maybe a little bit extra spirit cost, but it's still, I just don't see it. To me, the slow cast time spells are just very bad and doesn't fit my personal playstyle, so this is going in the D tier category. Next up is going to be Ice Weapon, which, like I say for every single one of these tier list videos, these elemental imbued weapon spells are forever S tier. Can't go wrong with a lot of extra damage. So yeah, S tier for PvE, S tier for PvP, very powerful, you already know it. Next up on the list is going to be Frozen Spear Trap, which sets an icy trap by your feet, and enemies that step on the trap will be impaled by sharp icicles and take damage. This spell does pretty decent damage to small mobs, but at that damage, it's not worth the high spirit cost of 686 spirit a cast. Obviously, the large Oni are weaker to ice, so it hits them like a truck. But once again, may not be worth it for the higher spirit cast in my opinion. For PvP, it's kind of iffy. It does kind of low damage, especially to the AI. Any normal player just easily deflects it, but it can be used as a defense mechanic to be able to get off like a quick heal and protect yourself from being hit through the heal. Overall, it's not something I'd ever see worth putting on my bar personally. Doesn't fit my playstyle once again, not worth the spirit cost, so I'm going to still put it in the C tier category because the damage on it is still pretty decent. Obscuring Frost is up next, and it generates a fog in the area and affects enemies in the proximity with reduced targeting ability for a certain period of time. So right off the bat, This isn't really meant for PvE too much. It does very little damage and doesn't affect their lock-on to you at all, but it does make it so anyone who uses a range attack, like these little guys with the pots here, they will miss the range attacks. But that's about it. And since you're primarily up in people's faces trying to melee them, it's kinda meh. This is purely a PvP spell in my opinion. This spell does a little bit of damage in PvP, but mainly because you want to use it for the 15 seconds of your opponents not being able to lock onto you. Wish I could kinda show you a better clip, but not going to lie, this game is kinda dying just a little bit at the moment, so I gotta take whatever clips I can get, but honestly, very strong spell. Making it so your opponent can't lock onto you is like kind of broken in a sense. Most players, including me, if anyone ever hits this with me, I just run away from it for the 15 seconds until I can lock on because man, is it annoying. But because of those reasons, I'm still going to put it in the A tier category just for PvP. Obviously, if you use this in PvE, D tier, F tier, Z tier, horrible, like there's no point to it. Unseeable Form is our next spell on the list, and it just basically makes it so it's harder for the enemies to see you, which I guess is kinda cool if you're trying to be a like pure sneak stealth build. Getting backstabs will build up your morale make more, so it's definitely something good there, but it doesn't work at all in PvP, so to me the spell is kind of meh. I still give it a C tier because the stealth factor is still goated in a way. Can't deny that. Next up we got Unrelenting Frost, which hurls a blast of ice shards and you can continue shooting them by holding down the input. This spell is so fun to use. It's basically a machine gun of ice balls. It does super low damage, but being able to hold it down melts enemies, but at the cost of a lot of your spirit. It is best of build if your spirit is in the positive, and then you let this spell rip, dealing tons of damage to enemies. I did already do an entire video on this for the spell in PvP, and it's just hilarious, absolutely locking your enemies, not allowing them to move at all, and then you basically just insta-kill them. Such an underrated, but great spell for PvP. Pretty decent for PvE, so it's going to still go in the A tier category. The damage, even though each ball is low with how many balls hits, is super high. And then Frozen Arrow is next on the list, which in short, you create an ice vortex above your head, and after a while, it shoots out an icicle on the enemies targeted while you activated it. And honestly, I don't really care for this spell. The tracking on them is horrible, so if an enemy is just walking in the wrong direction, the spell instantly misses, does pretty low damage, and has a higher spirit cost of almost 400 spirit at a cast. It's like a worse and delayed Frost Lance. Why wouldn't you just use that? I feel like they wanted to make it, like maybe have it in a PvP type of spell and try to delay the timing to mess with people, but again, with the horrible tracking, it's not even really worth to use in PvP. So this is going in the D tier, sadly. Next up is going to be Aqua Blink, and it allows you to instantly teleport to a certain distance. Honestly, there's not much reason to actually use this spell other than to be flashy and cool, which I respect. The second I see you using this in PvP, you're automatically my friend. This thing is just purely meant to be cool. So, S tier for the cool factor. Love Aqua Blink. Useless, but so cool. And here we go with our next spell being Ominous Chill, which summons small icicles to continuously fall on the locked on target or on the point of a certain distance in front of you. This spell is wild. Easily the best boss killer spell in the entire game. Each icicle does tons of damage, and there's so many of them that the damage on this is just, the output is massive. It is very clearly best for larger enemies because on the basic grunts it can miss very easily on, but this spell absolutely shreds if it can get every icicle to hit. In PvP, it's strong, but the chances of you hitting anyone is basically non-existent, unless your opponent is dumb like the guy I face here. So he too is actually using Ominous Chill, which as you can tell, with me knowing how to play, I just easily deflect it. It's no problem. But when he does hit, it does chunks of damage. Definitely an S tier overall, just for the fact that you can shred bosses no problem. Phantom Ice is going to be up next, and it's basically just Obscuring Fog, the other spell that I mentioned earlier, but for the range attack. So, messes up people's locks on again, but just like the other thing, it's kind of more focused for PvP rather than PvE, because it only messes up people's range attacks. But sadly, I couldn't find any PvP at the time of recording this, because again, sadly, the game's kind of fallen off. Okay, well, don't gotta talk about that. Love the game. It's alive, you guys. Anyways, regardless, even though this spell is purely for PvP, if you do want to use it in PvP, it is very powerful to use and easy to annoy your opponents with. So for that, it's going in the A tier. And then here we go with the final spell in the water tree. It's going to be Malignant Icefall. It summons a large icicle to the front on the locked-on or the target, the point, you know how it all works. This spell does tons of damage with a decently low spirit cost of almost 400 for its damage output. It's actually really nice. But not going to lie though, it definitely shines most in PvP. Using the spell outright will almost never hit your opponent, but it's best used after hitting them with a critical blow so you can get off that wake up attack to deal tons of extra damage. Very strong when used that way. So in PvE, I wouldn't really use this over Ominous Chill, it's basically just a worse version of that. But I will use this in PvP over Ominous Chill all day, every day. Also, look at this coward. See, he sees me kill his friend, going to kill him, so he just takes the flag for his iframes. Glad he's forever embedded as a coward in my YouTube video, so thanks for that, Mr. B2 Lit. But anyways, that's the end of the tier list and the end of the entire tier list series for these spells. I hope you all enjoyed these videos as much as I enjoyed making them. Let me know if there's anything else that you guys like to see on the channel, whether it's other games or even other builds for more Wolong PvP and stuff, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching and enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.